We are cleaning out the fish tank today because by the time this election is through, is the nation going to feel like it needs a shower? Since the beginning of the political conventions in July, the level of dirty words, bizarre actions, bizarre inactions, and abnormal party behavior have come fast and furious. And what's a voter to think? Let's take a look at a certain state right now. Utah, for instance. This is a conservative state. Well, Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson's state polling has picked up by 6 points here in the last 30 days. This is a staunchly red state, and it's heavily Mormon. So a state whose electorate thinks that way has got votes bleeding away from the Republican frontrunner Donald Trump and into someone who supports abortion rights. Well, on Monday, in walks independent presidential candidate, Utah native and Mormon Evan McMullin, who, with the help of conservative backing, is throwing his hat in the ring to grab those 6 electoral college votes from the Donald in the general election, perhaps tipping the race toward Hillary. Now, Mormons are famously against Donald Trump, but what, do they not understand the fact that he's entering the race to tip the race to a Democrat? Meanwhile, 64% of churchgoers in the United States say that clergy are speaking more and more about political and social issues. Overall, a conservative tone on abortion and homosexuality, a liberal one on immigration and the environment. So how does this affect the Christian population in this election? And then there's the Green Party convention in Houston, Texas. The Green Party's candidate Jill Stein right here. Houston wrapped up over the weekend. It was filled with Bernie supporters. So where are Trump and Clinton's promise to bring those guys in? Are they crazy? And the word crazy, it's batted around like an afterthought between the candidates and pundits in this election. When does it start crossing the line?
She took a little short circuit in the brain, and she's got problems.
Donald Trump, he is deranged, in my opinion. His psyche is sick. He is, to a degree, mentally ill.
He is not just unprepared. He is temperamentally unfit.
I've never seen him act like this before. It's unhinged. It's not the Donald Trump that I've known for over a decade.
The people of this country don't want somebody that's going to short circuit up here.
Joining me now to discuss all this further is political psychologist Dr. Bart Rossi. Thank you very much for meeting with me today to talk about this, Doctor. Let me ask you about something that is on a lot of people's minds regarding the Republican candidate. A lot of people want to give sort of television answers on what he is, but they're not really trained. Do you think this guy is a textbook narcissist, as everyone is saying? They're calling him crazy, unstable. What say you?
Well, I say, first off, it's nice to be with you. I say, first off, though, that we don't diagnose people without seeing them in the office and making a clinical determination based on a number of factors. However, in this case, in this election, it is very unusual because we have Donald Trump out there with so much behavior and so many comments that we can make some judgments about his temperament, about his personality, who he is, and what he's all about. And what I see is a lot of instability. I see a guy who's not consistent. He has discarded many groups of people, minorities, immigrants, gays, people who believe in climate change. Well, they're part of a liberal hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. He looks really quite unstable in a general election. And his personality and temperament is now an issue. It's not only an issue with Democrats and independents, but Republicans see him as someone who they do not feel has the right stuff to be a president. He doesn't have presidential timber, the character, the temperament, the personality, or the makeup to actually do the job.
But do you think that there is the banter has gotten to the point where it does an injustice to people who are truly mentally ill? I mean, there's a lot of talk about someone being crazy, someone being off their rocker, someone being a nut job. Do you think that this pushes us back? Patrick Kennedy was on network news talking about this very thing. Does it do a disservice to the medical community who has pushed so long and hard for legitimacy of mental illness, for it to be taken seriously as a physical problem?
I think it does. And I think that you can couch all of this, just as I said, in terms of what his behavior has been out there in the public, rather than going down this road and saying this person's crazy, he's a whack job or whatever. That stuff is really demeaning. It is demeaning to the whole profession of mental health and to people who have issues. But I think that it has to be taken in context. And a lot of times using these terms like crazy and all that is not good for anybody associated with mental health.
Can I ask you about the religious aspect in this election? We're getting more and more reports lately, especially this week, about religion being used as a political tool. Obviously, that's nothing new, but we're seeing it right on the front lines right now with the independent candidate, Evan McMullin, coming out. He's from Utah. He's a Mormon. It's a heavily Mormon state, trying to get votes away from Donald Trump, yada, yada, yada. We're seeing clergy get involved in trying to get people registered to vote. It seems as if this can have a detrimental effect on religious voters who are really trying to vote by their conscience. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that question make sense? It's just something that formulated today when I was reading all of these reports going, well, where does that put someone whose religion is really, really important to them and those theological beliefs?
I think it's a great question, because I think that what's happened is we're having a tipping or a leaning into religion coming into politics and coming into everyday life. I mean, I thought that this was the country where religion and people should have freedom when it comes to their religious beliefs, rather than push agendas. I mean, we have evangelicals that want it one way. Some evangelicals don't even think that Catholics are Christian. We have people who are so far to the right on religious views that they're extremists, and people on the left that are so far to the left that their views are seen as extreme in one way or another. And yet we're supposed to have a country that's got freedom. Freedom should mean that you can worship any way you want, but freedom doesn't necessarily mean that you should push certain agendas and try to tip an election based on your own political view.
Yeah, sort of like
something.
if you're a good Christian or you're a good fill in the blank, believe this way only. It seems like that's something that's really sort of being talked about a lot in this election, and it baffles me. What do we say when we look at candidates? For instance, Hillary Clinton, she said, I messed up with the server thing. Where's her apology? Isn't there some sort of there's a mental block in some people who literally cannot apologize, because that would literally be admitting doing wrong?
Yes, and I think that what I've done is I've criticized Hillary Clinton because she should have taken a page out of John McCain's playbook, where he said in 2008 that he was personally disappointed in himself for not doing anything or saying anything about the Confederate flag years before, flying in South Carolina. Well, when he said that, people just stepped back and said, wow, isn't this great that somebody can be self-critical? Hillary does not know that yet. She doesn't know how to really heartfelt
You
apology.
say the exact word that I was trying to find. I think a lot of people feel the ability to be self-critical. These two candidates seem to lack that, and voters are hungry for it. Is that what you think?
That's what I think. And I think voters understand that we are not ever going to get perfect candidates, especially in this electronic age where everything is exposed. That will never happen again, where anybody is even seen as being close to perfect or wonderful. But they should be self-critical, and they should comment on their shortcomings. I mean, you have the Donald who knows everything, and he's going to fix everything and make America great. He's got 6 bankruptcies, Trump University, and a multitude of problems, including his own behavior. And we have Hillary Clinton that has a cloud over her when it comes to truthfulness. So these are real problems, and people ought to know how to really identify their own flaws and their own shortcomings and highlight those as well. They probably gain a lot more voters.
And I think it's because normal people are used to having to come face to face with their shortcomings. Why not the leader of their country, for God's sake? And what about embracing the anger of Bernie voters? Tabitha Wallace, my colleague here, was at the Green Party convention over the weekend. A lot of Bernie supporters there, which is to be expected. But the two front runners, Clinton and Trump, have talked about embracing the anger of the Bernie voters. Where is their support for these fringe candidates, so to speak? supporters and Bernie voters. I'm talking the Libertarians, the Green Party's Bernie Sanders. It seems as if they don't want to marry their plans to any of these angry voters, and now these angry voters are left out in the ether.
Well, I think, you know, when you mention anger to me, it's really brings up the great point, because I see Donald Trump tapping into anger, you know, with his constituency. People are angry because there's too much emphasis on gays and minorities and everybody else in the world that they don't particularly want to talk about. But Bernie's people, yeah, there's anger there. How come I'm paying at a higher tax rate than the millionaires and the billionaires? And what's Hillary going to do about that? Really, that's a big question. But there's also another anger that I always want to talk about, too. And that's what about all the anger that people have associated with how Obama has been treated? The birth certificate. He's not one of us. He's really a Muslim trying to undermine the country. What about all those people who are angry about that? So the anger, to me, goes three ways, and it's not being met necessarily that well by both sides in this election.
That's right, and you know, we've got this new independent candidate funded by conservatives, Eva McMullen, someone with a couple hundred Twitter followers and CIA background, et cetera, not to rip on his background. He's obviously very good at what he does, but they push him out like it's 1950 and voters aren't going to know what the heck is going on. Very interesting, as always, to discuss voting psychology with you, political psychologist Bart Rossi. Thank you very much for joining me.